All right, hello, welcome to ICE Day 2. Just a few reminders, the exhibit hall will be open from 11:30 to 2 today. We will serve lunch inside the hall, and we are going to have our door prize raffle card taking place at 2:15 p.m. You must be present to win. The Margaritaville at ICE wrap-up event will take place at 5 p.m. today on the pool deck. We will have a live band, great food, and once again, an open bar. And just a few reminders, at the conclusion of this session, please provide feedback about the speaker and the presentation by scanning the QR code that you can find right here, or at the end of the presentation, I'll put it back up on the screen. Also, we have a new system for tracking attendance and sessions. It's near the entrance to this room right back there. You simply scan the QR code on your badge and your attendance will be marked. This is required if you are seeking continuing education credit. And details on your CE certificates will be emailed next week. And finally, it is my pleasure to introduce Lani Bartkowiak.
Bartkowiak, very close. It's
Okay.
Monday morning.
She is presenting a healthcare finance, how imaging services can impact an organization.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Happy Monday. Happy rainy Monday. I think so. There we go. Okay. So start off a little bit about ProHealth. My name is Lani Bartkowiak. I'm the HTM program manager. For those who may not be familiar with the acronym HTM, Healthcare Technology Management. In my role, I do capital planning, so both imaging and non-imaging equipment for the organization. Replacement plans are about 5 to 7 years worth of financial information that I put together for the senior leaders. So a little bit about ProHealth. We are a community-based nonprofit organization in southeastern Wisconsin, just outside of Milwaukee in Waukesha County. We have our org structure here. So both biomed and HTM report up through our director. On the biomed and imaging side, they report through a biomed supervisor and a biomed manager. And then on the HTM side, we have myself, project manager, project coordinator. We have our database administrator. And then we also have an equipment lifecycle planner. Some of you may be familiar with Chuck Overing. He's been in the business quite a long time. So that is the structure of our side, and you can kind of see what quantities make up each position on the biomed and imaging side. Just want to go through a few stats to give you an idea of what we typically accomplish in a year. This last year managed over 22,000 devices. We addressed over 21,000 work orders, including 123 that were related to cybersecurity concerns. We were monitoring over 4,500 network connected devices for cybersecurity. We saved over 1.6 million by redeploying medical equipment. We avoided over 1.3 million in costs by negotiating those purchases. And with the lifecycle planner, we were able to generate approximately 75,000 in selling unused equipment. So we do look at reselling versus trading in. So replacement plans, wanted to touch on this a little bit. A little background, I've been in my role for about 6 years, actually came into the Biomed HTM team as a project manager, moved into the program manager role. But as I've gone to these conferences and started understanding other organizations and how they operate, it became very apparent a lot of people do not have replacement plans. They may not even know what medical equipment they have, and they wait until it's broken in order to fix it or replace it. Downside to that, especially with imaging equipment, not everything is mobile, right? You cannot replace a CT system like that overnight. There's probably going to be some construction involved, depending on the age of your room or facility. There might be some renovation. There might be some infrastructure from an HVAC perspective as well. So it's not an easy fix. So the replacement plan allows you to have a schedule that shows you when your equipment should be replaced. It's a tool to help facilitate and support conversation, and that's probably going to be the key in this presentation. So remember that one. And it's also a means to help support organizational goals and initiatives. ProHealth, I'm not ignorant to the fact that we're a little smaller than some of the other organizations. We have about 4,500 employees. I do have a direct line, excuse me, to our C-suite, which I don't think every organization has. But understanding what is coming down the pipe from an organization's strategic initiative that might impact, do I go ahead and ask for this replacement of equipment, or do I need to hold off, or do I try to align it with when that particular initiative is actually going to take place? So all about that conversation. Why doesn't everyone have them? I think healthcare in general is a very reactive mindset. If you think about it, in quite a few instances, either clinic or hospital, right, you've got a patient who presents because they're experiencing some sort of illness or some sort of feeling or having a cardiac moment, whatever the case is, and we're reacting to it. So it's very reactive. To switch that mind to be proactive, it does take a little bit, right? So it's not necessarily something we're all comfortable with. So definitely having a reactive mindset will hinder people on having a replacement plan. They take time and effort. I know Carol will agree with this one. In today's world, there is not a system out there that is automated that looks at every single element that will drive your replacement plan. We have worked with different developers, some of the vendors as well, who try to pull the data out of your CMMS system to tell you based on age, based on utilization, based on the age of the technology, all those different factors, when are you going to replace a piece of equipment? But going back, what might there be coming down the pike with a strategic initiative, right? Does Fifth Floor feel like they need 20 Dynamaps when really the utilization is saying you're only using them probably about 10% of the time? Could we take some of those and redeploy them, right? So instead of buying net new, let's look to redeploy. So there are many subjective factors that need to be taken into consideration, and that's why I think for most of us that have plans, we live in Excel and we manipulate the data, if you will, as to when we're going to replace a piece of equipment versus a system automatically generating that information for us. And a lack of understanding. Again, going back to what I've learned over the last 6 years in this role, there are a lot of people that don't even know what they have. They couldn't tell you what they have. They don't know the life of it. They don't know the downtime of it. They don't know the struggles that maybe staff have with a piece of equipment or a preference of a piece of equipment. We're not immune to that. So it's just that overall lack of understanding of what you've got in-house. So some of the benefits for having a replacement plan: helps drive standardization. You get away from having those preferences, right, where maybe a piece of equipment is getting utilized a lot because that's what your rad techs really like. And what comes to mind in our world is mobile x-ray. We have 2 different vendors. We were trying to standardize to one. We're in that switchover phase, right? And you're finding, they're not using the new one that they selected because of X, Y, and Z, right? Now it's in the real world and they're utilizing it and they're going back to what they had, but yet they don't like what they had either. So it's that mix, it's that balance. Cost avoidance. So again, going back to what we've been able to do with our negotiation, replacement plans, they lay out for you multiple years of what you're anticipating to replace. You have the ability with vendors to say, I'm not just going to negotiate for this year. Look at what I've got in year 2, year 3. Let's look at what that new price is going to be for all of them for the next 3 years, right? And you're able to use that as leverage to bring down your cost. Plans to seed. Oh, I have seen. It's supposed to say seed with senior leadership. Again, I have a direct line. I do reviews with my senior executive. I report to Rob Bundick, who's our director. He reports to Brad Treichel, who is our chief transformation officer. So I do a review every year with our CTO. So he knows both from an imaging, non-imaging perspective, what does my plan look like for the next few years? And I can get his immediate feedback to say, does the organization have an appetite for me to spend $12 million in imaging and $6 million in non-imaging this year, or do I need to bring that down? And unfortunately, we all lived through COVID. We all lived through the financial strain. We all lived through hearing, no, you can't replace that. We don't have the dollars for that. Well, it doesn't change what you have on your plate to replace, right? You're kicking the can down the road. And it's having that dialogue to say, Brad, we can't take this down the road anymore. We need to replace it. So either the organization needs to support that, or you need to understand the risk of us not replacing it. And again, it's that dialogue. Improves the odds of getting capital approved. We did a process change. So in our organization, we used to have every single department request the capital that they wanted. So one hospital, radiology, would request a replacement of a CT scanner. The other hospital would request the replacement of their CT scanner. You'd have clinics who are asking for replacements of equipment, all of that good stuff, right? And in our organization, I don't know about yours, they go through a prioritization process with our VPs. So everything that rolls up to the VPs, they now get to rack and stack where they want it in their list, right? Well, especially on the clinic side, based on how our organization is structured, we have different leadership amongst the different clinics. Somebody might say, yep, we rank this high, nope, we rank it low. And so you really have a hodgepodge of aged equipment throughout the organization. We changed that. We said, let's take that off of your plate. Let's put it onto my plate. And now I submit the capital for each modality that I have a replacement plan for. So CT, for instance, or actually I'll use X-ray because that was a fiscal year 26 ask. I have 4 X-ray systems throughout the organization, 2 hospital-based, 2 clinic-based. Instead of those different leaders requesting the replacement, I put in one capital line item for 4 replacements of X-ray. What we've seen over the years is, and what we've proven with our plans, is that I might go into the large bucket of capital ask, but I get carved out on the side and they know that, yep, you need to replace that equipment. I don't go, my asks don't go against the rest of the prioritization process. I'm kind of, like I said, carved out, right? Given a different look at it, a different approval. And I will say over the last couple of years, even during COVID, I probably have had 1 to 2 items per year not approved out of probably 15 asks. So we've really been able to show the value in our replacement plans. And by changing that process, there's no longer difference in priorities. It's looked at as a whole by modality, and we definitely do get that approval, which is wonderful. It's a relationship builder. Again, this is kind of a theme that I've heard yesterday, and I think we'll probably continue to hear today. Like I said, it is not, it's not lost on me that I have access to my C-suite. Most people don't. But to build those relationships so that people understand what it is that you're trying to accomplish, what value you're trying to add to the organization, right? Building those relationships, having the conversations, building the trust, you will see the results in your ability to get better approval on your capital, your initiatives filter to the top a little quicker. So relationship building, not only at the C-suite, but I would say even at the clinical leadership level. I meet with all of the directors and VPs on an annual basis to understand, okay, here's everything that you've got, right? Let's talk through it. And I still have some project oversight with our project manager and project coordinator. So I'm still building those relationships on a daily basis as we go through various projects. It really, really helps drive home what you're trying to accomplish. So it wasn't always, I don't want to say easy, but it took some time to get to where we're at. So at the beginning, it started off with a single imaging plan, had minimal strategy around how we were laying that out, and we had limited engagement with stakeholders. When I came on board 6 years ago, Rob Bundick and our biomed supervisor, Dan Blaisdell, were co-managing the imaging replacement plan, and that's the only replacement plan that we had. And they recognized that there was a lot being left on the table by having 2 leaders in the department co-manage versus 1 person run with it. And that's where Rob was able to create my role, and I came in. So what we started implementing are some process changes. Like I said, instead of all the individual managers, directors submitting their capital, I now took that off their plate. And let me tell you, they are willing to give you that. I don't think most organizations will find it where the directors say, no, I really want to enter that capital. You know, they're happy for you to take that. Committees. So when I started with ProHealth Care 10 years ago, I was actually an IT PMO, and then I moved over to Biomed and HTM. So I still have good relationships with our IT folks. I now co-chair a clinical device integration committee with IT. And in that, we talk through what are those devices that we've got on the network that have an integration component into the EMR or into PACS. And we talk, we meet quarterly, and we also include various clinical leaderships to understand what are those struggles that you're having in your day-to-day. Are there things that you're hearing about in your worlds with your cohorts that some sort of integration with the device would make your staff's lives easier? And we talk through that, and we get ahead of that so that we can proactively account for any of the work or do some of the research or make sure that the infrastructure behind the scenes that supports data integration is where it needs to be to continue supporting that. So started that so that we have a good relationship with IT. Expanding partnerships. So again, the IT one, construction services, finance, and senior executives. So when I started, I would put in my capital requests. And as you know, in the imaging world, if it's not mobile, there's a construction cost when you need to replace it. And as I'm sure you're all aware, construction costs have not gone down in the last, forever. They keep going up. And I will tell you, our C-suite struggles to understand why construction costs are so expensive. We looked at replacing one of our systems in our OR, it's our hybrid room. And the construction in the room, because the age of, it wasn't the room itself, it was the infrastructure, the HVAC system, the air handler, and the cost of that and what it's all feeding based on the design. To renovate that room for the new piece of equipment was $2 million alone. And they said no. Going back to, we knew that there was going to be on the horizon a project that was going to renovate all of our ORs. It was going to integrate our procedural spaces. So last year I got the no, this year I got the yes, and we're going to be replacing it actually in the next year as part of our integrated procedure space project. So again, understanding, right, what are those strategic initiatives that are happening that, okay, that makes sense of why I was told no, but Lani, you're getting it next year. Great. Construction services, going back to that one. So when I started, I would put in my capital. Construction services would then go ahead and do their budgeting that needed to be done within a month, and add that to my capital request, and it would flow through. We've changed that recently in the last 2 years. One of the construction project managers now handles capital. So I meet with them in the fall and I say, Matt, here's what it's looking like for this next year. Let's start the process now. So we're engaging our contractors so that they can go and do the investigation in room, right, to understand what what needs to happen. We're getting the preliminary drawings so that we understand what's the mechanical, electrical, some instances plumbing, right? Understanding code changes. In CT, the codes have changed. In our organization, we do not have a sink in our CT rooms, and we don't have a sink outside of our CT rooms. Guess what? We need to now add that sink, right? That's an unplanned cost. So we've changed it now where we're actually partnering with construction services and we're ahead of the game. So by the time I'm submitting my capital, they're putting a bow on their request, their budget, and working with operational leaders so that they understand what that breakdown of their budget is, because it is a high cost, in some instances more than my equipment. So we've changed that to show that value to the organization as well. Finance, I have it in my slides. I now provide finance information so that they understand what is the capital outlay, what's the operational outlay. And we've just started this last year where I'm actually projecting out what that cash flow is. So not just when you're committing the dollars on the books, when is that piece of equipment going to arrive? What are the payment terms for that particular vendor? So that I know when our first invoice is going to hit and when is that second invoice going to hit. So they're seeing that cash flow. And then senior executives, again, I work with our CTO, meet with him, provide him information. He provides me real-time feedback, or he'll get back to me, things like that. Going back to the whole relationship thing with senior executives, our organization at this point, Brad, our CTO, had shared with me that I might have an additional $4 to $5 million to spend this year. I should find out in the next week or two. But again, showing the value, showing what I'm projecting the next couple of years, and what he had said is based on what we've got on the horizon, we want to pull some of that in so that we're not spending it later when we've got some other strategic things happening. Future state, we want to expand and mature our replacement plans. You'll see I have a number of snippets of our replacement plan. It is back from when Dan Blaisdell, our supervisor, was managing that. It needs to be updated. There are definitely different elements that need to be considered into driving when that piece of equipment should be replaced. We acknowledge that. We know that we need to address that, and we hope to do that in the next year. We also want to expand our replacement plans. So I cannot tell you how many times I have the OR director, Lani, can you take on scopes? Don't want to get in that world, but understanding, like, can you take our stretchers? Nope, that's managed by facilities, right? Can you take on this? Can you take on that? Injectors, trophons, what have you. People want to give you that equipment to put on a replacement plan so they no longer have to deal with it. They can get back to what they need, is to pay attention to patient care and their staff. So that's been huge. Improve oversight with partners. Again, we're still evolving, right? Last year, we weren't doing the cash flow outlay for finance. Now our director of finance, our CFO, sees that. So we're doing that. We're tweaking our process a little bit with construction services. I'm actually going to be meeting with Rob next week when I'm back, and we're going to be doing a Visio to workflow it out as to all the different pieces and puzzles and where do they come in at what point and how does that process all look, so that we're all on the same page, right? Everyone's going to have hiccups, bumps and bruises along the way, but it's that continual evolution to improve that process. And then also continuing collaboration with the various vendors, and we'll get into that a little later. So these are some of the things, most of the things that all go into my replacement plans. So clinical device integration committee. We hear feedback from operational leaders. It was actually that meeting where we heard that our director over labor and delivery wanted to do video EEG with Advocate Aurora, and they were buying the equipment and we needed to integrate it. Had no clue, but IT and us, we heard it for the first time in one of those meetings. It's also a method for me to report back where we're at with some of the initiatives from a capital replacement perspective. Cardiac patient monitoring is a big one for us. So I have that plan and I'm able to report back to those leaders who are, all of them on that call are impacted by it, to let them know where we're at with the replacement, either for that year or for their areas. RFPs. I work very closely with our director of supply chain and logistics. on RFPs. We're actually going to be going through one with that integrated procedure space. It's about time that we reevaluate and look at who are the lights and booms vendors out there, out of my wheelhouse because facilities manages that, but I picked the short straw and I help with RFPs. We'll do that with wheelchairs. We'll do that with, we did that with OR tables. We do it with various modalities, probably depending on the modality, every about 5 to 7 years. Ultrasound, obviously the technology changes faster. So we definitely do more RFPs there, but we do use that. I have a spreadsheet, it's later on in the slide deck that shows the data that I'm gathering and providing. Again, operational input, meeting with those directors, managers, even the VPs in the organization to say, okay, this is what I'm projecting out based on my data. What's your feedback? Recently, we made a shift where, and I say this respectfully, my replacement plan was to show more of what biomed and imaging could support versus the operational drive, because operationally, they might want to replace something sooner than what I have it earmarked for. If that is the case, we have taken the stance that the operational leader then needs to request that capital for the year or two ahead of when I have it slated, and they need to justify it. We just started that last year. Didn't go well for the operational folks. Again, we've proved that our replacement plans are doing what they need to do. They're providing that cash flow, that financial impact outlay. We're able to replace equipment with a proactive mindset, but we're also able to show we're an in-house program that our biomeds, our imaging techs can support that equipment. So our organization listens very closely to what our leaders provide as to what we can or cannot support. Department partnerships, kind of talked about that, right, with construction services, IT, even finance, with some of that comes into my replacement plans, and then the senior executive engagement, which I think I've talked about. So device integration here with our committee. So we are a group, biomed, IT, informatics, operational leaders all coming together. We're developing, monitoring, maintaining the strategy and infrastructure for device integration so that can thrive. We do evaluate the different offerings and associated infrastructure. So again, if an operational leader says, hey, I'm looking into this for next year, we're already ahead of the game to understand what is that integration impact so that we can plan for that. Recommend fleet replacements in support of any of our EHR integration offerings. So we do have that dialogue there. And provide advice and oversight for any requested device integration enhancements, issues, deferred future functionality. So one of the things that we've talked about recently too is smart pump interoperability. For our organization, that was an initiative, but nobody wanted to own it. Operations didn't want to own it, even though it would be an efficiency for their staff. Pharmacy didn't want to own it because they don't own the pumps, right? And everyone was trying to give it to biomed, and biomed's like, we just support the pumps, we have nothing else to do with them. So lack of ownership, but again, that is an avenue for us to talk through to understand, is that coming back up and we need to plan for it or not? RFPs, so getting a little more into that one. So we changed our process of how we were handling RFPs. And the reason why is we identified some key issues or barriers. One was lack of requirements for clinical areas. Project managers understand requirements. Most operational folks don't understand requirements. So to try and pull that out is a little challenging. That's where, again, that relationship building comes into play, right? There are certain things that you're going to need a piece of equipment to do. And I'm going to use a bad example because we're at an imaging conference and this is a non-imaging piece of equipment, but I'm going to use it anyways. So our lights and booms, right? The lights in an OR need to do what? They need to shine light on your sterile field. But there could be requirements as to how large or how small you want that focal spot to be. There could be requirements as to how warm or how cool you want your lighting to be. What is the amount of lumens that you want? Do you want to be able to dim them off of the light itself, or do you need to do it via the wall, right? There are different requirements out there. X-ray, poor example, right? Because what I'm always told by our rad leaders is X-ray is X-ray. But do you need a fixed table? Does it need to shift, right? Do you need, how tall do you need the detector to go, or how low do you need the detector to go on a wall bucky, things like that, based on the types of scans you're doing at that particular location, right? It's us understanding that. So as we go and evaluate, we know that, nope, that vendor can't do it. Let's cross it off, right? Yep, that vendor can. You're still in play. So it's really getting out of, from the get-go, what are the requirements? What do you need that piece of equipment to do? Lack of consistent RFP process, it was all over the board. So now we've tried to bring it together. One process, the same people involved leading that process, so that we hopefully get a consistent experience. And then key stakeholders not always identified or included. That's crucial. You want to make sure that everyone who needs to be at the table is at the table, right? Depending on your organization, does EVS need to be included, right? Infection control, do they need to be included? So it's maybe not somebody you think is in the room or directly impacted, but they do have a stake in the game. So what we needed is we needed to create a comprehensive RFP document that we were making sure had all the equipment, or I'm sorry, all the information that we needed, centralized management of that process, and a mechanism to track and summarize vendor responses. And the reason why it's important to do is it's a process to help ensure the best clinical and financial decisions were being made for the organization. Again, I say this respectfully, clinical in our organization will always win out. But no one historically understood the financial impact. And they need to be aware of that. Our organization, and transparency, we're more willing to spend it on the capital side, we're less willing to spend it on the operational side. So to understand the impact to your operational budgets was key. And we do a rolling forecast, so we wanted to be able to call that out so that people knew what was going to be hitting their budgets. Again, all part of that process. So this is what the RFP document looks like. So at the forefront, we're calling out all of our stakeholders here. Who is the person from each department involved that needs to have the say, right? What amount of impact? Are they highly impacted? Do they just need to know what's happening? They really don't care. And then you can see the other ones that we kind of track. This is requirements, simplistic, right? You're gonna list out all of your requirements here, but you're gonna tell me, is it critical? Is it a showstopper if you don't have it? Are you gonna tell me, yep, it's a future asset I want sometime down the road, don't care if I get it today, don't care if I get it in 5 years, but eventually I'd like it. And then what I do is I put together on my little spreadsheet here, all of my one-time costs, my capital costs, and what that is. Putting together my cost of service, right? I'm asking the vendors, you tell me in the first 5 years of ownership, what are the 2 most costly repairs that you see on a consistent basis so that I can plan for that. May not happen, but I'm gonna plan for it. What's the cost of your PM kits? What's the cost to train my biomeds? What's your labor rate? How close are you? And warranty. And I put the warranty in there because usually if they're not willing to budge on anything else, we do ask for an additional year's warranty. So we use that as a negotiation element. We capture this down here if it's applicable. Any of the disposables, supplies that might be associated. If we're changing a piece of equipment, where we're getting our disposables or what disposables we're using might change, right? And we want to understand that impact as well. So as you'll see, I only have 2 here. I usually have 3 to 4 vendors. And then I put in all the data and you can see then the financial impact, the true cost of ownership over 5 years. It can be rather eye-opening for some people to see the difference. And I'll say that typically this information is off of, it's not your best and final quote, right? But you can use this information to help your negotiations. I don't, because our leaders like to see all the nitty gritty detail. So far it's worked without me having to do a pivot table. Yes, I think they'll be available at the end, my entire slide deck. And if you want the actual Excel file, feel free to reach out to me, happy to share.
We all love you right now.
Why
We were all gonna sit there and go, oh God, I have to recreate this in Excel.
Nope.
And thank God we don't need a pivot table, you can keep your sass to yourself. But the fact you're willing to share the
Absolutely.
Excel file.
I'm not selfish. If you guys, any of the documents that you see, again, it may not be exactly what your organization needs, but why reinvent the wheel? I'm giving you the foundation for it. But it's all about making sure that you guys are, growing. You have the tools that you need to help those conversations and to start that process, right? Operational input. So from a biomed HTM perspective, I'm meeting with our leaders, right? Rob, our director, Nick, who's our biomed manager, Dan, our supervisor, but I also include our device integration analyst, and I also include our cybersecurity analyst as well. Because obviously cybersecurity risks, right? Those are huge. Not to scare you all, we're in the process of replacing a cath lab that's still running Windows NT. Cybersecurity concerns there, right? My hybrid OR is still running XP. Cybersecurity concerns there. Calling that out though and having that dialogue so then the organization, the leaders understand what is your cybersecurity risk? Because it's not going away and it's not a matter of if, it's when, right? So that helps drive that approval of getting the equipment replaced. Understanding operationally, what's that downtime that you're experiencing, right? What's the technology that's out there? A lot of our rad techs, where we're based out of Waukesha County, right next to Milwaukee, a lot of them will work for us part-time. A lot are working at Freighter. Some are working at Advocate Aurora, right? Different vendors, different technologies, different processes. Help us understand. What do you like? What don't you like? Standardization. Again, from a rad tech's perspective, to make it as easy on you to go room to room to room and have the same experience and not have to remember, okay, shoot, I'm on that piece of equipment, I'm on that vendor. It's different. What's my process? Standardization is big. Partnerships. So these are my three, this is the trifecta. Construction services, purchasing, and biomed. So from a construction perspective, they're reviewing the replacement plan for the upcoming year. Once I've kind of baked it out, met with all the different leaders, we're good on what I'm going to be asking for the next year, meet with construction services. They'll then engage operational leaders as well, right? Does the room need to be refreshed, or is it really just replacing that piece of equipment and we're sticking with the same vendor? There isn't really a big change in electrical, it's just some flooring in and call it a day, right? It can go from very little to very large. They'll then call in, like I said, the contractors. They're going to investigate mainly above ceiling, understanding especially what that air handler situation is like, because ProHealth Care, our main campus, is over 100 years old. So we've got some updating to do. And then they provide a budget for construction so that we can add it to the capital ask. Purchasing, again, working with them for standardization. Anytime that we have a standard, a change in our standard, I'm reporting that back to the senior buyer who's updating their spreadsheet that lives on the INET so that all of their buyers and all of our organization can go to that and see what is that standard piece of equipment? What's that standard patient monitor? Imaging equipment, not so much out there, right? But from a non-imaging perspective, we've got a lot of standards out there that we want to try and drive the adherence to. They do assist with negotiations. So I'm involved, but I let them go be the bad guys. Leslie, our director of supply chain and logistics, and my boss, Rob, like to be the bad cops so that I maintain a good relationship with our vendors. Determining supply, disposable, contract, all that good stuff. So we leverage purchasing for that. And then also due to our financial policy, our transaction policy, different leaders have different dollar amounts that they can approve. So we leverage our director of purchasing for that typically. This is the replacement plan at a very small snippet because you see it's just C-arms. So the different data that I'm collecting at this point, it'll be on the, it'll,
It looks like ours.
does it?
Do you partner with GE?
No, GE, we did work with GE to create something, but we had this actually, I share this with GE. I've shared this with GE for the last 6+ years. Looking at the life cycle stage of the technology, right? We're looking at the age, we're looking at utilization. We have an integration, I'll say it because we use order. We pull in that utilization data. It's a little subjective, right? I mean, you're putting your hours of operation in there, but you don't necessarily know how often that piece of equipment is used. That's hard to capture. So it gives us a gauge. Like I said, the age. So then what we do is anything that you see in green, we're not touching it that year. We're just maintaining. Blue means that we're replacing it. Red is we're retiring that asset. Yellow you don't see on here, but that's typically when we're going to upgrade. So for instance, like CT, we are now standardizing towards one vendor. Our old vendor does interim upgrades, buys us some additional life, right? It may not be the standard, the new vendor that's the standard, but based on where my spend is on an annual basis, we might just need to upgrade it and leave that one to get a little more because there are higher priority items that need to get replaced. Again, it's looking at all of that subjective information, right?
You track tube usage
I do.
on a different sheet, possibly?
I don't track it on here. I use the high, low, medium utilization. That information lives in our CMMS system. So I can pull more data behind it, but we leave it pretty basic for this at this point.
I'm just saying to the budget for replacement.
Yeah, yep. I debated if I should include this or not. I threw it in there. So on our spreadsheet, we have a tab. We put budgetary information out there, right? It may not cost me $920,000 to replace the CT. In fact, I can tell you it probably doesn't at this point in time. And I can also tell you that, where are you? Linac, my recent quote came back at 5 million. It's not 4.2, but I have a placeholder out there for future years. So it's not speaking to my immediate next year, but I've got something to place out there for future year. So like this, right? I have all my modalities here. It all comes so I can see what I'm spending. I add a little summary here at the bottom for senior executives so that they understand the detail behind it, because I'm not going to show you 2 slides ago, green, blue, red. I'm going to show you just a summary of what makes that up. Couple things that we do here, right, that any of the automated systems are not going to do. I try, and this is a little misleading, but I try to average out my annual spend. How do I do that? I'm looking at what are the modalities that I'm replacing? What are the vendors that are in play for those replacements? What is my mix of construction versus non-construction? So I'm looking at all of that. So while I may think data-wise, I should, let's say, replace something in fiscal year 28, I'm having the conversation with Dan Blaisdell, my supervisor. I'm saying, Dan, it might be a little high. Can we support it another year? And he'll tell me, yes, we can, or no, we can't. And I'll go down to the next, and I'll do that with each line item when I meet with them so that I can try my best to balance this out, because the last thing that our organization wants are ebbs and flows that are quite dramatic. This also sets the game for our long play. Eventually, where we would like to be is we no longer need to request our capital. Eventually, we want our senior executives to give me a $15 million bucket, and I will spend it however I see fit. So in order to show them where my spend is, I want to average that out so that I can get to that goal.
What do you use other for?
It used to be new, and we weren't hearing of new equipment that was coming from operational leaders, like an additional CT, right? I'm not requesting that. Operations request net new. We changed it to other. I haven't updated this yet because I'm still waiting for some feedback. Our biggest one was our linear accelerator. It came back as 5 million, and our CTO said, Lani, that is not something that we would be willing to say yes immediately to. We need to have a little foresight to that, right? And they do, but based on the way that our vendor, Varian, plays their game with their quoting and how they want to bundle it, the impact financially to the organization, Brad wants me to step out of that. So I'm now going to move linear accelerator into other. It's not something I'm going to be requesting, but I still want our senior executives, when they see my summary, to still have line of sight as to when that's going to be taking place so that they know that that's happening. Again, fostering that conversation amongst them and then with that leadership group.
Does he put a contingency on it, or does he just take a percent? Because we don't know that those are accurate numbers until you get something hard.
In my experience, I know even though my dollars might be a little off on each modality, I'm not going to spend $12 million. I'm going to negotiate under that. This last fiscal year, we just wrapped up fiscal year 24, I saved $1.4 million.
You get some flow.
I got fluff. Always give yourself fluff. It's easier to give back the money, and your CFO will love you for that versus saying, no, I kind of lowballed it. I need an additional $1 million. That's not going to fly.
Are you taking out of service contract repairs into account for life cycles?
Yes, from when can we support it perspective. Again, we're an in-house. We don't have service contracts. So it's a little different, right? Understand that a lot of people may not have an in-house biomed program, but that's where we're at. But yes, we do look at that because we might have some sort of coverage, right? Tubes, what have you. So yes, we do take that into consideration. This is and I only have 10 minutes left, so I got to speed this up. Sorry. This is part of the summary that I then provide to the senior executives, right? Here's what it is, the modality. Here's what my capital ask is. I give them a little summary. I'm calling out what quarter I'm anticipating to spend those dollars, right? This is the cash flow that I was talking about. So I'm telling them, when do I anticipate that PO to be issued? Is there any construction, right? So for this guy, we have 4 months of design that needs to take place. We're then anticipating about 3 months for DHS approval, 5 months for construction. Total duration is 12 months. I'm expecting the equipment in November, and they want 100% at delivery. So I can tell you that we're paying that invoice in November, December. So they already know, based on our fiscal year, we run a October 1 to September 30th. They already know that those dollars aren't going to hit the books until actually fiscal year 26. They're already projecting that they're going to roll those over to the first quarter. I give the breakdown too. So of my spend for the year, what's my mix? What's my quarter breakdown? Our organization is historically very, very conservative in the first quarter to release dollars. But I will tell you this, we negotiate a bundle deal with GE with our spend in the first quarter. And the last 2 years, we've done the same with Stryker. I've asked for those dollars in Q1, and I have gotten it every time in Q1 because I can show what dollars we're going to be saving. the organization if we do it now versus later. Now it's just anticipated that I'm going to ask for those dollars. So plan execution. So centralized capital request process, kind of went through that, right? It's improving my chances of getting my capital approved. It allows me to continue our efforts to standardize equipment. Leverage discounting. Again, we're not just looking at that one single year. We're looking at years 2 and 3 as well to say, I'm anticipating these replacements. Let's talk. Needs to be a little sharper pencil. Engaging finance, right? Showing them the breakdown of what that spend is going to be, both capital and operational, and what that outlay looks like. And I also work with finance because they shepherd the request through. So in our world, I might submit for the release of funds, but finance is the one that makes sure that it gets onto the senior executive team's agenda so that they can approve my release of funds. So I do work with finance to shepherd that through the process. And then project management. We have our project manager. I do a warm handoff to her, and then she'll take it from there. I still have oversight, but we do hand it off to the project manager. So she's involved with construction services from a design planning perspective. She's the one engaging the vendor, getting those preliminary drawings, the final site specifics, right? Making sure that the timeline, construction schedule, all of that comes, you know, in one beautiful package. This is another spreadsheet that I supply finance. So gives you your breakdown, right, of what you're quoting me, Mr. Vendor. Here's what your final price is based on what you're offering. Here's the capital portion. Here's my operational portion, my trade-in. So what do I actually need that capital amount to be when you create that cap ID for me so that I can issue the requisition and PO? So I provide all that to finance so that they see that. And then more importantly, right, operational, they can add that to their rolling forecast, each operational department. So this is where we're at. So it started right in this time frame. So my first full year on the job saved $394,000. You can see we've grown a little dip, COVID, but we've shown the organization that we're able to save money. So what's next? Like I said earlier on, we want to continue expanding. I have about 20 modalities on the non-imaging side, want to expand that out, right? We've got 22,000 pieces of equipment. It does not make sense for everything to be on a replacement plan, but certainly we need to expand that so that we can grow the value that we're providing to the organization. Enhancing partner engagements, again, continuing that growth of process with construction services, with finance, with purchasing, all of that. Never want to be still. There's always room for improvement, right? So looking for that opportunity to improve. And then continuing working with our developers. So we have worked with GE in the past. We worked with, before we switched CMMS vendors, we worked with Connective to try and build something for them, right? There was one other one that we worked with. And again, they're able to collect all that objective data and put a plan together. But in our organization, the way that we're structured, there's so much subjective that cannot be put into that. I need a way to manipulate it. So to this day, spreadsheet is still the king for us. So some lessons learned that we've had. Change is difficult. Nobody likes their cheese moved, right? It's different. It takes some time to earn that trust. Again, that goes back to that relationship building, right? Showing them that it can work. You're striving for the same goal. In the end, it comes down to patient care, right? You want good equipment, you want the right technologies in there, you need to meet the needs of staff, better patient outcome. Life happens, COVID happened, we all experienced it, threw a wrench into everyone's replacement plan that had a replacement plan. And now we're trying to figure out how do we uncover ourselves from that, right? Make sure that we're still replacing the equipment. And then timing is important. Again, that hybrid OR, right? I asked for it last year, $2 million construction. I was told no. Didn't know that there was going to actually be where it was going to happen, our renovation of our OR suites. It made sense. Let's pause it. Let's do it a year down the road, right? So with that, questions. I think I'm